Subscribe to The Honest Critique for current affairs, movie, book, and product reviews. Also, make sure you press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the video series are solely those of the individuals and do not necessarily represent those of The Honest Critique and its employees. The following video contains strong language which may be offensive to some viewers. Viewer discretion advised.
So hello and welcome to another session on the Security Intelligence Terrorism series. Today we have among us Air Marshal Anil Chopra, who is a retired Indian Air Force officer, and until 2017 he was the administrative member of the regional branch of the Armed Forces Tribunal at Lucknow, and currently he is the director at CAP. So thank you so much, sir, for taking your time, and thank you so much for your service. In Indian Air Force, though it was officially established in 8 October 1932, but there has been missions. I think in India, though being one of the second highest volunteer army in the World War II, it has played a crucial role, the Indian Air Force. And if you could talk about the role of the Indian Air Force in World War II and particularly the war in Burma.
Yeah, thank you, Ratnadeep and Srikanth, for inviting me for this interaction. And it is always a pleasure to be talking through you to the people of this country and tell them about Indian Air Force, about the air power and the space power, which are very, very crucial. I must tell you that the air power itself was only 120 or less years old, because the first flight of heavier than air aircraft took place only in 2003, and immediately after that the First World War started, and during the First World War we saw that actually the air forces started forming. The Germans formed the Luftwaffe, and the British formed the Royal Flying Corps, which later on became the Royal Air Force immediately after the war. So aviation is not very old, but I must tell you that Indian Air Force came into being also fairly in 1932. Interestingly, the Indian Air Force and Air India more or less came up together, and the aviators, whether it was J.R.D. Tata and the pioneers of Indian Air Force, they were colleagues, they were friends, and they were already very active in air activities. So after forming in 32, the Indian Air Force, which later on for a short while was also called the Royal Indian Air Force, saw action in Wazirabad. You know, Wazirabad, the northwest frontier province, during the British time, they were rebels, and therefore there was a lot of actions. But the major action for the Indian Air Force was in Burma. That was now the Myanmar. That is where the the British had to fight the Japanese. And the initially we had only one squadron, that is number 1 squadron. But subsequently, as the war began by 1942 onward, more squadrons of the Indian Air Force came. Some of the names that I want to mention about the Burma campaign is, of course, Arjun Singh, who later on became the Marshal of Indian Air Force. And there was this Jumbo Majumdar, there was Subroto Mukherjee, of course, was there, and there was Harjinder Singh. There were a lot of pioneers who did a great job in Burma.
Okay, so sir, the real test for the Indian Air Force came in post-independence in the 1962 war with the conflict of China. I think during the period of 20th October to 20th November, there was the real test for the Indian Air Force. So if you could talk about the 1962 operation a little bit, and I'll move on to 65.
Randeep, I must, talk about one more operation that happened before 62, and that is very important because Indian Air Force really came into real colors in 1947 and 48. you remember that when the Maharaja of Kashmir was still making up his mind and finally decided to cede to India, the evening that he signed the instrument of accession, next morning at first light, 6 Dakotas took off from Delhi with the first Sikh regiment of the Indian Army, and they reached Srinagar. Mind you, the intruders from Pakistan had already reached on outskirts of Srinagar town, and you know the famous battle in which Major Somnath Sharma, who got the first Paramveer Chakra after independence, he was trying to hold back the Pakistani intruders, and the timely arrival of the army airlifted by the Air Force made a big difference. The second and third events that took place in the same period was having a landing strip which was created by the Indian Army at Poonch, and how the Indian Army was moved by Indian Air Force by the famous Air Commodore Baba Meher Singh, who himself flew to Poonch, and Poonch was saved, and a large part of that area we were able to retrieve back from the intruders. The third thing that happened in that period was opening an air route to Leh. Again, Baba Meher Singh, Air Commodore Meher Singh, he was the first to fly into Leh, and accompanying him in that aircraft was General Thamaya. He was later on the army chief. So I thought it is important to mention that air played a great role in saving Kashmir Valley, the Poonch area, and also the Leh and Ladakh. So this is very important. And of course, 62 war was a very, very big event for the country. The Chinese had intruded both in the northeast and in Ladakh. Unfortunately, for some reasons, the Air Force was not sufficiently used in offensive operations, though we did carry out some of our Canberras flew into Tibet area for recce sorties. Some amount of close air support missions were flown. A lot of transport and helicopter missions were flown, but in real offensive roles, striking the Chinese airfields, etc., those roles were not given to the Indian Air Force because of political and international diplomatic reasons. But I must also mention that the capability of Indian Air Force then existed because we had relatively more modern Western aircraft, where the Chinese had relatively older Russian aircraft. So if we had been used, Indian Air Force had been used more offensively, you would have found that maybe India would have lost less ground. India would have had lesser casualties on the ground. Yes.
Yeah. And now let's come to operation in the operation in 65. What happened? And that was one of the massive success where squadron leader Trevor Keller, I think, had the first kill with a NAC, and then flight lieutenant GS Patania has also one of the other kills. So I'm just naming two of them, but if you could talk about the operation altogether.
Yeah, during 1965 war, I was a young student, a cadet in a Sainik school in Punjab. And I have very fond memories of my childhood, having seen air combat physically taking place on top of our school during the 65 war. Yeah, you know that in 1947, the Pakistanis had tried to take away part of Kashmir. 65 war was also called the Gibraltar, was also an aim to get into Kashmir. And by this time, now why Pakistan did such an attack was primarily because they thought after 62 sort of debacle for Indian armed forces that it was a good opportunity, and India perhaps was weak. But between 62 and 65, Indian Air Force had bought MiG-21s and many other new aeroplanes had come in, and Indian Air Force had become very, very strong. And as you rightly brought out, the famous Keeler brothers, it was not only Trevor, but his younger brother, a few days later, also shot down a Sabre. In fact, they both flew the NAT aircraft, which was originally a British aircraft, but subsequently we made in India the NAT. and NAT was thereafter called the Saber Slayer. So Indian Air Force did a great job. The overall casualty rates was somewhat balanced in that war. The main reason was that Pakistan is basically an air defense oriented force. They know that India has got much larger number of aeroplanes, much greater force, and therefore the Pakistanis have designed the air force to be on the defensive, and whosoever takes offensive and goes deeper into enemy territory, there is a risk of some aeroplanes getting shot by ground fire or air. So I think 65 was a landmark event. First time an Indian Air Force was used extensively in offensive role, and Indian Air Force came out in absolute flying colors. Yes.
Yeah. Now let's come to 1971 operation, which again is probably one of the most satisfying operations for the Indian Air Force, where it's not just the NATs but also the mixed squadron has played a very important role in that. And a flying officer, Nirmal this thing Shaken, and the flying knots with 18 squadron from Srinagar was awarded the Paramveer Chakra. And I mean, the entire Western theater, the MiG-21 was deployed, and the Mukti Bahini. If you could talk about how the operation went about, and probably this is one of the very most remembered mission of the Indian Air Force.
Yeah, 1971 war is absolutely historic in many ways because a huge country was liberated by India. It had not happened since the Second World War. This war was very, very different and very, very special. This was also a war where joint operations between Indian Army, Navy, and Air Force were absolutely copybook type of operations. Let me talk of the air war in the East first, then I will tell you a little bit about the air war in the West. Just before the actual war began, of course, the Indian Air Force was supporting the Indian Army's ground operations. Also, some kind of work was going on with Mukti Bahani. But just before the war, about 15 days before, there was a border clash that was taking place between Mukti Bahani and the Pakistan Army in the east. And the Pakistani Air Force decided to come in support. So they sent 4 Sabres to come into this area called Boira. So they made one support mission for the Pakistan Army. When they were coming for second mission, by that time our radars knew that these guys will come again, and therefore Indian Air Force was fully prepared for this kind of operation. 4 aircraft came, the Indian Air Force boys from Calcutta Airport at Dum Dum. They were operating, and they have shot down 3 of these 4 aircraft. Out of the 3, 2 were crashed, and one and the pilots unfortunately died. And in one aircraft there was a pilot, Flight Lieutenant Pervez, who ejected, who was captured and was with the Indian Army, and we really looked after him. And see the irony of life. Later on, he became the Air Force chief, and he was the Air Force chief during Kargil war. And that's a very interesting, story because he had great respect for Indian Air Force and Indian Army, the way we had looked after it. 2 major operations that took place in the East. One, of course, 3 rather. One was the Tangail airdrop, where the Indian Air Force dropped a large number of Indian paratroopers behind the enemy lines, and they cut off one full brigade of the Pakistan Army, which also accelerated the process of surrender for the Pakistan Army. The second was the Meghna airlift by helicopters. Me-4 helicopters of Indian Air Force moved the army, hopping, crossing river after river, to make the advance of the Indian Army much faster. Imagine such a huge country being taken over by India within a period of just 14, 15 days. And lastly, in the East, on 14th of December, there was an airstrike by 4 MiG-21s led by then Wing Commander Bishnoi of 4th Squadron, and they knocked down the governor's house where there was a meeting going on to decide the future course for East Pakistan. And that actually helped accelerate the process of surrender. So these 4, 5, of course, there are many more stories of the war in East Pakistan. Now, as far as West is concerned, the first thing you mentioned is about Nirmaljit Singh Sekhon, the only Paramveer Chakra of Indian Air Force. He was a young flying officer operating from Srinagar airfield. The airfield was under attack. There were 6 sabers who had come to strike. And during the attack, Nirmaljit Singh Sekhon got airborne and engaged these enemies. The second aircraft had not yet got airborne. So single-handedly, he had to fight to begin with 4 sabers. He is known to have shot down 2 sabers, but in that whole process, one of the sabers had also got behind him and he got shot. Absolutely a devil act for having fought a single person who fought these intruders. 2 areas where Indian Air Force greatly supported the Indian Army operations. One was in Cham area, because Cham area is an area where Pakistani Army has a little geographical advantage over us. And often that's an area where Indian Army comes under pressure, but we have large forces there. And that is where Indian Air Force Su-7s from Adhampur, they carried out a lot of strikes. Many of our aircraft were hit by ground fire, but stopped the Pakistanis from crossing over into that area. Then, of course, we all know this movie Border. We have seen, Longewala. Longewala was a tank battle where Chandpuri got a Mahavir Chakra major who was holding one company, and a full regiment of Pakistani tanks, over 45 tanks came into Indian territory, and how the major immediately called for help from the Indian Air Force, and Indian Air Force sent its hunters, and they flew round the clock sorties and knocked off most of the tanks. The few which were left actually were chased away. They ran away because the number of tanks that had been shot. So actually, Longewala is a peculiar battle which has been taught in the staff courses all over the world. How a close air support against enemy tanks can be so successfully done. So 71 war, we shot one F-104 of Pakistani Air Force, which is a Mach 2.2 fighter jet. It was shot by a MiG-21 of the Indian Air Force. We knocked off the Karachi, the refinery from the air, while the Indian Navy was, blasting Karachi harbor from the seaside. Many other big events took place. But one small emotional story of that war, I must tell you. There was one Flight Lieutenant Karyappa of Indian Air Force who later on became an Air Marshal. But during the war, during a strike into Pakistan, he had been shot, and he became a prisoner of war. Then the army chief had been a colleague of his father. Now, General Karyappa, later on Field Marshal Karyappa, you all know, was the first army chief. And the army chief in Pakistan happened to have been his junior when they were together in Indian Air Force, when India was together. So he called up the general. He said, "Your son is with us. He is prisoner of war, but I promise you, I'll look after him because he's your son. And you know what? And that if you want, I can have him sent back. But look at General Karyappa. He says, no, he is not my son anymore. He is the son of this country, and I do not want you to show any extra favor. If Pakistan has decided to send all the prisoners back, please send them. But otherwise, I would like my son to be treated like all other Indian prisoners." See, this is the kind of spirit with which the Indian armed forces, have grown. Right? Yes.
So that I think that emotional story added to the much needed answer that you gave, because sometimes behind wars we forget certain emotional touches. But thank you for putting the story out. I would have come to the Operation Pawan as well. But with Operation Pawan, I also want to include a little bit deviating from, not in a chronological order of the history that has taken place. Yes, Operation Pawan is one of those operations where the Indian Air Force has been deployed to foreign country. But also we have if you talk about the Indian Air Force working for relief programs as well, in for example Operation Rahat, or in fact the Operation Neer in Maldives, or the Operation Hudhud that happened. Uh, uh, if you could talk about the Operation Hudhud happened in Andhra Pradesh, my bad, but if you could talk about the Indian Air Force outside the country as well, so some operations and for the relief programs.
Yeah, let me tell you that air power is a very, very significant element for providing HADR, humanitarian assistance and, disaster relief. It is the first responder. The air is what reaches first. Whether it was in Nepal, whether it was in Sikkim, whether it was in Uttarakhand, whether it's in Maldives, whether we had to pull out people from Yemen or pull out from Iraq when the Operation Desert Storm was to start, air was the first to reach. Yes, subsequently the ships and various other means are used because they follow up in a day or two, but air reaches within hours. So therefore, air has a great role in all such kinds of operations. Now, whether we went to Sri Lanka before the IPKF, we did a show of force there. Our AN-32s went and dropped some rations and supplies, and then the Indian Air Force Mirage 2000s were escorting them. Whether you went to Maldives, Operation Cactus in 1988, you dropped a para brigade to make sure that the political turmoil in that country, is kept under control. Air Force has a great role in out-of-area contingencies and out-of-area operations. Now you see more recently, even during COVID, the Indian Air Force large transport aircraft, now the C-17, we have a global reach. C-17 can go from here to Europe. It can carry supplies, can bring back people. So HADR has, and a helicopter fleet, every year there is some flood, a cyclone or something happening somewhere in the, country. And the first to reach are the helicopter boys from Maroon Islands. They are picking up people, they're dropping food and medicines. So I think Indian Air Force is absolutely doing an outstanding role through the year on HADR operations and out of area contingency operations. Yes.
This is something now. I think I won't be talking about this question much. I will leave this to you. The operations of Sagar. If you could, in detail, talk about how did the Indian Air Force played a very important role in the entire Kargil war during that period of time, and if you could talk about how, due to those airstrikes, we had a chance in the victory.
Kargil was a very peculiar operation. Not very many wars are fought around the world at that altitude, snowbound areas, between 15 to 18,000 feet altitude. Most weapon platforms, weapons are not designed to be operated at those targets at those altitudes, because all over the world, no wars have been fought. In fact, the only wars being fought at those altitudes are between India, Pakistan, and India, China. You saw the recent activity going on in Ladakh. We saw what is happening in Siachen Glacier. These are the only places where air power has been used at such high altitude. Now in Kargil, the Operation Safed Sagar is what they named it. Initially, the army was managing this exercise for a few days on their own, but the extent of number of people that the Pakistanis had put on the posts, a large number of posts in that area on top of Dras or Kargil and that, Batalik sector, was very, very significant. And once that was understood, because Indian Air Force had quickly put in Canberras and other aircraft for recce. In fact, one of our Canberras during a recce was shot, it lost one engine, came back, did an emergency landing. And that is the time when country understood the extent of which this whole magnitude of the operation Pakistanis had done in a very coward way. Just a few days earlier, we had the Indian Prime Minister going to Lahore on a peace mission, but the Pakistani then did this kind of a backstabbing exercise. Now, once it was decided to bring Indian Air Force, there were many choices for Indian Air Force. One, of course, was to knock off individual bunkers, which we did over Tiger Hill. The bunkers were knocked down with laser bombs dropped by Mirage 2000 aircraft. But a large number of other type of operations took place. The helicopters and transport supported the army reinforcements. They supported army fire. But biggest thing that paid dividend in Kargil was taking off the Pakistani logistic nodes at Mantodhalo. There was a complex of logistics from where the materials and logistic supplies, the ammunition, the food stuff was being sent on top to the Pakistani troops. These were knocked by the Indian Air Force, different aircraft, the Jaguars, the MiG-21s, and of course the Mirages. They dropped, most of the bombs dropped were not necessarily laser bombs. They were, normal iron bombs, but they were very, very effective. Now, Indian Air Force not only hastened the end to this war, greatly reduced the Indian Army casualties. Mind you, if the enemy is sitting on top of the hills, when you have to climb and recapture them, the risk and loss of life can be very heavy. And India, the army's brave people, 4 Paramveer Chakras in that war, and 2 of them we have seen recently on television on Kaun Banega Crorepati, and we heard their tales directly from them. So I think the Indian Air Force played a great role. We learned a lot. I personally feel that Kargil was like a dummy run for, God forbid, a full-fledged war was to happen in Ladakh after this Galwan incident. Then we had learned, Indian Air Force had learned a lot of lessons how to fight a war at those altitudes. Yes.
So, sir, I think this was a perfect start. If I could put in an Air Force language, a great cider burst to actually move on to the more issues that will be discussed. So, Siddhant has the initial question about the organizational structure.
Yeah.
So the organizational setup and the various commands of the Indian Air Force, how do you divide it, and what is the role of each and every command? For example, we have the Southern Command, we have the Eastern Command, and of course the Northern Command, and then we have the division across the LAC and across the LOC. We have different kind of deployment and different squadrons attached to all these divisions. So a little bit on that, sir, if you can give a brief background about it.
Yeah, let me explain to you how the Indian Air Force command structure is. We have an air headquarters at New Delhi, which is the overall agency that looks after the entire Indian Air Force. They are the ones who interface with the government. They're the ones who make sure all the spares, etc., what have to be procured from outside, new aeroplanes. They are looking at everything so that the field can remain operational. So that is the job of air headquarters, and there is an air chief who is the father of the family, and he's sitting in New Delhi. And the country is divided into 5 geographical commands as far as Air Force is concerned, and 2 functional commands. Now, geographical commands have been worked out over the years. Some formations were there before independence, and then we started fine-tuning them. Now we have the threat perception, which keeps changing. The Pakistani threat perception, the Chinese threat perception. So based on this, some geographical commands have been formed, and number of commands kept increasing over time as the Indian Air Force become bigger and bigger. Starting from 47 to today, the Air Force has multiplied some 8-10 times. So it is a huge service now, very potent, with a large number of very, very potent platforms. So we have the Western Air Command, which is the biggest air command because it handles a bulk of the threat from Pakistan and also part of the threat from China. It includes Punjab and Kashmir, Haryana, parts of Rajasthan. This is the general area of the Western Air Command. And then there is the South Western Air Command, which is Rajasthan, Gujarat sector, which came up much later. Earlier, it was a smaller formation. And around 1980s, we formed the Southern Air Command because we felt that there is a threat from the peninsular region. We'll need to support the the maritime forces with the air. So Southern Air Command has come up, and gradually their assets are increasing. The LCAs, the Su-30s, more and more fighter aircraft will go to Southern Air Command. And then, of course, we have the Eastern Command, which is looks after Assam and West Bengal and areas east of Bihar, if I may say. And East is getting a lot of importance, not only mainly because of the threat perception. Also, a lot of development work is going on in the Northeast. That is also for strategic as well as reasons to uplift the people of this country. So that next command is Central Air Command. Now, that is the command which is in the center, Allahabad-based command headquarters, which covers UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, general area of this nature. And they are also holding the strategic assets. You don't normally put the strategic assets in an upfront border airbase. So maybe at Agra, Gwalior, some of these places, they have some strategic assets that have been placed. So this is the general structure of the command headquarters. Each command, as per threat perception, have been allotted some. They have certain amount of fighter bases. They have some fighter aircraft allotted. This allotment is decided centrally, depending on the threat perception. Also during joint discussions with the government and with the other services. So that is the general structure of the Indian Air Force. Yes.
Okay. So, sir, if you could now take us through a little bit about the various types of aircraft we have. If you could divide it, it's divided into three parts: the fighter aircraft, transportation aircraft, and helicopters. Briefly, you could tell us about our air power in terms of composition of these three aircraft.
Yeah, the any Air Force. Firstly, I must tell you that one more element has got more or less embedded with air power is this space. So it's normally called the aerospace power nowadays because space, the thin line dividing the air and space is now disappearing. Private companies, private people are sending rockets. There are tourists who will start going. A lot of activities taking place in space. So there is we need to look at this entire bubble from ground till the space, because every country, especially the major powers, are trying to get, position themselves in space for supporting the, war on the ground. So, firstly, I must tell you. So, but today we will not talk about the space element because that's a separate subject altogether. For the Air Force, the cutting edge, of course, is the fighter bomber aircraft. So we have a huge force of Su-30 MKI, which is our largest fleet. We have recently inducted the Rafale, which is again a very, very modern aircraft. They have already been tested in wars elsewhere. In like 4-5 operations, Rafale has been tested. We have presently ordered only 2 squadrons. The first squadron will be fully formed by middle of this year, and another squadron will form by sometime next year. So Rafales are a big asset. Then we've had Mirage 2000, which has been the weapon of system of choice, whether it was in Kargil, whether it was in Balakot, in various operations. The Mirage 2000 fleet has done. I'm proud to say that I'm one of the pioneers of Mirage 2000 fleet, having trained in France, and I was in the very first formation that landed in India. The Mirage 2000 formation in 1985. So we have these fighter aircraft. There are some legacy MiG-21s, but they have been upgraded, modernized. They are the Jaguar aircraft, which have been upgraded 2-3 times, and still they are flying. We have the MiG-29s, which have also been upgraded, like the Mirage 2000. So a significant fighter force. Yes, currently the numbers of squadrons are a little low. But actions are in hand. The LCA has already joined in. A lot of new Indian weapons have got inducted. So fighter fleet is taking a good shape. and they are becoming more and more formidable. Then we have the transports. Now we are very well off in transports today. We have got the C-17s, nearly 12 of them, and then we also have the C-130, which is for special operations, and the workhorse is AN-32. We have got nearly 15 to 18 IL-76. So good global reach. We can have intra-theater movements of our troops and logistics. So we are well off in transport fleet. We have the Avros, which are going to be soon replaced by a C-295, which is the EADS aircraft. And then we have the smaller Dorniers, etc. The third pillar is the helicopter fleet, which is we have the recently introduced Chinook and Apache attack helicopters. We had the earlier Mi-26, but we have large number of medium lift helicopters that are the Mi-17 variants. And we have got now the Indian helicopters coming in big numbers. We have got the ALH, we have the weaponized ALH, we have the light combat helicopter. So a lot of activity. I must say that Indian Air Force have more than 400 helicopters, which is a significant number. Another fleet which is now having a great significance for the last 15, 20 years is the unmanned aircraft, the UAVs. We are investing heavily into UAVs. The numbers are going to increase. Newer UAVs are already being talked of. We're going to import. But if you saw the recent Aero India, there were a large number of locally made UAVs which are now up for sale. And more of these UAVs and UAV swarming, which is being demonstrated, they are going to be inducted. And we also saw that the LCA is working on UAV manned unmanned teaming with one LCA will control a couple of UAVs who will be leading in front, knocking off targets before the main force comes. So there is a lot of action. One statement I want to make, that very early after the Second World War, the Americans, the Russians and the Chinese realized, the Chinese little later, that one who controls aerospace controls this planet. So therefore, if you see the annual capital budgets of this country, defense budgets, the biggest amount of investment, capital investment goes to the Indian Air Force. And the reason for that is because there is newer technologies coming in, old technologies have to be phased off, and so therefore a big chunk of the capital budget of the military goes to the Air Force. So this is generally the structure of the as far as the flying side is concerned. But there is other structures which are very important: the ground radars, the missiles, ground-to-air missiles. There are weapons on board the aircraft, which are very, very important. The AVACs, whether it's in the air or the ground radars, which are there covering the entire country, the entire border, to ensure that not only air defense, but also support the offensive missions. To support all these people of Indian Air Force, there are engineers and technicians without which the aeroplanes won't get ready, the bombs will not get loaded, the weapon system platforms will not work. They are quietly working day and night to make sure that the cutting edge, the fine edge, the sharp edge of the blade is always kept sharp. And that is, and there is an administrative branch in the Indian Air Force which is making sure that everybody is looked after, their accommodations, their families, their medical, their housing, their schooling, their various other things. So three pillars: the flying branch, the maintenance branch, and the administrative branch. Three solid pillars, all working in close coordination with each other to make sure that boy who's fighting and facing the bullets gets to be absolutely well supported. Yes.
All right. Sir, the Indian Air Force now faces the challenge of mustering enough aircraft to tackle down any possible collision between the Pakistani and the Chinese Air Force. Related to tensions, the recent tensions that have happened across the line of actual control, the LSC with China seems to be the Chinese seems to be activating air platform in its Tibet airfields. And along the border with Pakistan, the Pakistan Air Force recently conducted an air exercise out of Skardu base in Gilgit-Baltistan. So taken together, all these rough challenges that we are facing from both the fronts, the Indian and the Chinese side, the Pakistani and the Chinese side, what are our strength in terms of acquisition compared to Pakistan and the Chinese Air Force, that we are prepared, that how well are we prepared to face the challenge?
Yeah, so essentially Srikanth, there are two questions you have asked, and I'm going to answer both of them. Question number one is, how are we acquiring strength to be able to take on these two people, and also talk about how these two people can, collude, or what kind of a aerospace nexus that exists between Pakistan and China. So there are two biggish questions, but let me answer each one of them one by one. See, first is that the acquisitions by the country are dependent on two things. One, of course, is the threat perception, and the second is the budgetary support that a country like India with huge numbers, whose welfare has to be looked after, whose standards have to be raised, gives X amount of percentage of money, a percentage of the total GDP's money to the armed forces. They try to bring a balance, and they also try to, at diplomatic and political levels, to ensure that we don't have to immediately go for war. But we, men in uniform, we have to prepare based on the orders given by the government of India of their threat perception. And the government of India, in Parliament, the defense ministers have made statements that you have to prepare for a two-front war. So therefore, the Indian Air Force acquisitions, we are supposed to have 42 combat squadrons. Today we have around 31. We have hit the bottom, which was around 30 last year, but the trend is going up. The LCAs are now being inducted in larger numbers. The Rafale has come in. The Su-30s have been bought. We are buying some additional MiG-29s, 21 of them. We are buying additional Su-30s, 12 of them. Like that, more acquisitions are coming, and with the larger number of LCAs coming, we hope that as far as the Indian Air Force's cutting edge is concerned, the numbers start going up very quickly, and I'm very hopeful that in next 8, 10, 15 years, we would get back to the numbers that we required. 42 is a decent numbers, mind you. As far as capability is concerned, over the years, capability is going up. What Rafale brings in terms of weapons and accuracy, or the Su-30 has, or the Mirages upgraded have, is much, much greater than the aeroplanes that they replaced. But yet, we need numbers, because the government has told us that we have to prepare for a two-front war. Transport helicopters, we are okay. BrahMos is a great weapon that we are inducting in very, very large numbers with Army, Navy, and Air Force. The air-to-air weapons are coming in big way. We are fairly well off in ground-based radar, but more are coming. So therefore, overall, we are, these fighter squadrons are the only numbers that we have to increase. In all other departments, of course, 2, 3 other things that we require to increase in numbers is, one is the AVAX, and one is the flight refueling aircraft. So these are areas for which the government and Indian Air Force, they're all working to get the numbers up. Now, coming to, Pakistan, China nexus is a huge subject, but let me try to briefly, explain this aspect, because, when China, in 62, we had a war with China. In 63, Pakistan ceded some part of the Saksham Valley to, Pakistan, to China, to make friends. And they realized that an enemy's enemy can be a friend, and that's kind of a exercise they did, and they tried to come closer to China. And China has been supporting, they've helped Pakistan build their aircraft industry. China had interest in Pakistan because they wanted a corridor to go to the Arabian Sea. They wanted to have a corridor to go to the Arab countries. So for various reasons, China supported, and well, the entire Pakistan aircraft industry, especially, even the army, the tank and others are Chinese based. But today, I would say that 60% of Pakistan's Air Force is China based. Now they are making the latest JF-17, but before that they have had a large number of different variants of the MiG-19 variants. They have had the MiG-21 variants of the Chinese make that they were there. Now JF-17, of course, is the crown jewel between the two countries. Now, I won't delve more into what all they're working together, because a lot of information is available in the public domain, to everybody. But the work is being done closely, as it will help interoperability between systems, because the systems have been designed in China and being manufactured in Pakistan. The second thing that Pakistan and China are doing is they are doing these exercises. Since 2011, they started these Shaheen series of exercise, and we all know that recently they finished the ninth Shaheen exercise, which has been done for the first time in the southern region at a new air base, which is about 100 kilometers north of Karachi. For the first time, they used large number of transport aircraft, AVACs, of the Chinese origin. They also first time exercised their maritime forces. So that means a total number of 9 series of Shaheen exercises have been done between these two countries. And the Chinese get an advantage to understand from Pakistanis, because Pakistanis do exercises in Middle East, they do it in Europe, the Pakistani Air Force does it with the Americans. So Chinese are coming to learn from the Pakistanis, how to exercise, how they must, train against these people. Pakistan has an advantage because many of the aeroplanes that the Chinese bring are the Su-30 class of aircraft of the Chinese. So therefore, both are trying to understand. And of course, since both have border issues with India, and they now, as far as two-front war is concerned, I must tell you my personal feeling is that if China and India were to have gone into some kind of a war, mind you, all three are nuclear powers. It's not a joke. War is not a joke. So if China and India was to go into some kind of a war, China will not let Pakistan get into the war, because that will be a shame on China for being a more powerful country with larger size, larger defense budget, larger armed forces to get Pakistan on their support, because then the issue can blow up in more other countries can come in and they, okay. But Indian Air Force is prepared. In 2018, we did that massive exercise called Gagan Shakti, in which we factored in a two-front war where we simulated move of troops from one sector to the other. The Air Force assets. We did long range, flights. And as far as Ladakh is concerned, good that finally the de-escalation is taking place. No country wants war, but in Ladakh region, Indian Air Force had a clear edge. The Chinese have got only 3 airfields. One is Gargunza, which is at 11,000 plus feet, which is a civil airport, also used sometime by the Pakistan Chinese Air Force. But their main airbase is Hotan, which is about 350 kilometers from the area of action. Hotan can take on up to about 3 squadrons. And there's another airfield 600 kilometers from area of action called Kashgar. Whereas Indian Air Force within 350 meters of Galwan, kilometers of Galwan, has got 11 air bases. Our air bases are all at 500 meters above sea level. The amount of number of missions that we can push in, the number of weapons that we can carry is much larger. Of course, we should never underestimate an enemy. Chinese do have some better aircraft. They have got the bombers, though they are vintage, but they've got much larger number of missiles. But India has factored in all that. And in case of a war in Ladakh, localized war in Ladakh, Indian Air Force had clear edge. Yes.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. That was a very, very detailed clarification on all the challenges that I asked about. Coming towards the latest upgradation in the Indian Air Force, which has been very much in the news, is Dassault Rafale, the French innovation, the French magic that people say that the Indian Air Force has acquired now. So, sir, observers, some defense experts and observers have often maintained that inducting Rafale in the Indian squadrons is not going to solve the Indian defense problem or even the Indian Air Force problem. Adding to that, sir, what are the Indian specific enhancements, or what we can say the modifications of Rafale to suit India's air warfare requirements? So on that particular front, sir, something from your end.
Yeah, ever since Rafale induction has been going on, I have come repeatedly on television channels and I've explained to them how Rafale has been sort of a game changer in the region. Of course, just by acquiring a small number of Rafale doesn't change the overall equation totally, but certainly makes a dent. And that dent is very, very important. Presently we have ordered only, 2 squadrons of Rafale, but in the long term, whether it's the Rafale or some other equivalent aircraft that will be inducted, that process is on. And this is a process. Every time in the past we have ordered only two squadrons to start with, and once the aircraft and the fleet got settled in the ecosystem, and then we have ordered more aircraft. Now I'm a test pilot, and let me have a look, and a fighter pilot, so I must tell you how Rafale is a game changer. There are 3-4 aspects of Rafale which make it better than any platform that's available in the region, whether it's with China or Pakistan. Its ISA radar is proven, tested in operations, and it is better than the best ISA radar available. Pakistan doesn't have. They will be inducting the first ISA radar with the JF-17 Block 3. The Chinese have ISA radars, but we all know how the Chinese have been sort of struggling in their ISA radars, and only time will tell, because from China the news doesn't flow out. Most of the Chinese details are in a controlled way, released by them more for propaganda and psychological warfare. So I say radar. Second, as far as the weapons are concerned, yes, Meteor is clearly a world-class missile. Even the Americans like Meteor. All Europeans are using Meteor. It's a good missile. It's got a good range, around 150 kilometers. There is no missile in the world which has got a higher no escape zone than Meteor. Means no escape zone is that once you are in that range, you do whatever maneuver you want, you will not be able to escape the Meteor. That is no missile in the world. Even the Americans don't have a missile which has got a higher no escape zone. Electronic warfare suite in the Rafale is absolutely one of the top ones in the world. Their engines are highly reliable. Chinese are still struggling to have their own good engine. They're using Russian engines, and we know that the French engines are really very, very world class, and low maintenance, high turnaround. The Rafale will give you much more number of missions. So if you see the overall package, Rafale is a good aircraft. Yeah, numbers are very few. I personally would like that the country must go for more aircraft, for a sizable fleet, because now as far as India enhancements are concerned, yes, we asked for some changes in electronic warfare suite. We asked for changes in helmet mounted sights, because we want commonality with some of the systems which are already with us. We wanted infrastructure for 2 air bases instead of 1. We wanted some additional systems, the decoys for systems that we asked her, some low and high band jammers that we wanted change in. We asked for maintenance support till 2050. We inbuilt it in the contract that you cannot have, say that companies have closed down, we can't give you radar spares after 30 years or 20 years. Then we have asked for minimum serviceability. They will have to maintain our fleets serviceable, because otherwise there'll be penalty clauses on them. So therefore, these are very big 8-10 things. There were other minor things, but I thought I'll just tell you the macro level things that India enhancements have come. And then of course we have good pilots who have seen wars. India has fought enough wars. We have got good experience. The Chinese haven't fought any war. They hardly do any exercises with anybody. We do exercises with the entire world. The Americans, the French, the British, Australians. We are doing exercise with every guy. We are now, Indian Air Force is sitting right now in UAE doing exercise with a large number of forces that they have got from European and other countries. Yes.
So, sir, I'll ask you one definition for our audience to actually, so that you can define that out. We hear a lot of terms in the media that it is, for example, it is a upgraded legacy fighter, or it's a legacy fighter, and the other is a developed contemporary jet. So if you could define those two terms, what are they? And the second part is more of that a government-approved 42 squadrons, but the Indian will currently operate only 131. And going by the statistics, by 2024, the force will shred the last of its MiG-21 squadrons, and only 3 replacement squadrons will be there over the same period. Uh, will that be sufficient with 30 squadrons when it approaches the quarter mark of the century to tackle both the Chinese and the Pakistani air force?
Let me first explain to you your first part of the question, that is about the upgrades. I was the team leader of MiG-21 upgrade project in Russia for 4 years. So I understand what is the meaning of upgrade. Any air force in the world, whether they are Americans, Russians, Chinese, India, everybody, they have 3 levels of aeroplanes. There's a percentage of aeroplanes which are absolutely top end, which have been brought, like for Indian Air Force, it is the Rafale or Su-30, they are the top end. Then there's a second round of aeroplanes like Mirage 2000, MiG-29s, which came in the 1980s, have been upgraded. Now, when you say the upgrade, the airframe has not changed much. It has changed a little bit because some fuel has got added, some, the shoulder has become bigger for MiG-29 or something like that has happened. But the big thing that happens in an upgrade is avionics and weapons upgrade. All airplanes in the world are flying at Mach 1.6 to Mach 2. So there's no need to have any aeroplane go faster. No new aeroplane is flying any faster than this Mach area. Everybody is pulling 9G. So basic airframe requirements have finished. In old times, we used to have close combat when 2 people got engaged at very close ranges. That all is gone. The combat distances have increased. The missiles are fired from longer ranges, the radars are picking up enemy targets. So therefore, even the Americans, they are looking at, there is an F-15 which have been upgraded recently. There are many other old aeroplanes. There are flying bombers which are older than the oldest bomber flying anywhere in the world. The Americans are still flying. So the point I want to make is that there are 3 types of aeroplanes. One which are brand new aeroplanes coming in. Then there is the second group of aeroplanes which are upgraded, and the third group which are being gradually phased out. So these are the 3 groups. Mind you, the MiG-21 upgrade, the Bison, has got weapons which are very good. The R-77 missile is very good. It has got a Copio radar which can fire. They can fire 2 R-77 simultaneously on 2 different targets. I'm not saying, but when you actually acquire aeroplanes, you have to keep in mind what the other guy has got. If other guy is buying a latest model Mercedes, you can't be saying I will be still on Maruti 800. Okay, let me put it that way. So therefore, we have to have numbers. We have to have technologies. As far as Pakistan is concerned, we are, because of our much larger budget, larger air force, larger means, we are not. We are not even talking about Pakistan, if you notice, for last 3-4 years. Other than Balakot strike, we don't even look at Pakistan Air Force as much as we are concerned about China, because they have so much more money and they are not trying to compete with the Americans. So therefore, the so-called legacy fighters, as long as they are, every aircraft that get airborne is 100% serviceable, 100% operational, and has the capability. That's it. Yes, if the country can afford more money, Indian Air Force certainly would want to get out of those older aircraft and buy a much more capable newer aircraft. Now, the second part of the question is again a little bit of a repeat of the earlier question. Yes, we are down to 31 squadrons. There have been some delays in modernization. We do have a slow decision-making system in the country for various reasons. And the government is coming out with new policies to hasten the decision-making cycle, cut down bureaucratic delays. Bureaucratic, I don't mean only the bureaucracy. There is a bureaucracy within the armed forces, within the government, within the political system, in every country. So my contention is that certainly we need to have hasten it. But the most important thing that the country has to do, for which a wake-up call has come very, very clearly in the last 3-4 years, whether it's from the Prime Minister or from the Defense Minister, is Atam Nirbharta. Chinese realized this in 50s and they started reverse engineering aircraft or stealing design. God knows all kinds of unethical things they might have done. but they started becoming independent of Russia, America, and the Western world. India started that process late, and we need to quickly catch up. Nobody is going to give you technologies. We have to invest more in R&D. We have to create our own technologies. We have to start building our own aeroplanes in much larger numbers with our own capabilities. And India has capabilities. Our doctors, our scientists are sitting, all over the world. They are in commanding positions in all big companies of the world. Indians are commanding positions. That shows that we have the capabilities. So therefore, defense production, the private sector is just entering, the amount of systems that Tata and L&T and various other companies are making in India now is becoming significant. And I hope this push and drive continues, and we, ultimately not only start supplying weapon platforms to Indian armed forces in larger numbers, but also start exporting, to get larger numbers, economy of scale. Yes.
All right. Sir, one couldn't agree more about what you said about Atmanirbhar Bharat, and thank you for bringing out, because my next question is about the same. Sir, we are now seeing the news of the light combat aircraft, the homemade Tejas, and on 13 January 2021, the Cabinet Committee on Security finally decided and declared that long pending acquisition of 73 improved Tejas light combat aircraft, Mk1A fighters and Mk1A trainers. So, what are your views on indigenizing our Air Force with homemade Indian aircrafts? What are your views on that? Because you just commented about it. We need to escalate it more. We need to accelerate the process, and we need to have the private sector involved in the process. So, what is your take on that?
So undoubtedly, LCA is a game-changing program for Indian aircraft industry. We made the Marut HF-24, but we could not. We made about 121 of them. It was an excellent design. There was a German designer, Kut Tank, who had come to India, who had helped us, design a beautiful aircraft. Unfortunately, we could not get a good engine because of political reasons, because the Americans were not willing to support, and we couldn't get an equivalent Russian engine. So finally, the aircraft did not succeed in spite of being an outstanding design, designed in India to get into large numbers, and it finally sort of had to be phased out. Now, LCA project has been done in a very, very different way. The project management has been very, very different. The Indian Air Force has been closely involved. Unfortunately, still the LCA has taken rather long, if I may use the word, because as a nation, perhaps we did not get our act even more together than was required. But let's not get into the history of the delays, but that point has been crossed. The LCA, the second squadron, is forming. The LCA is performing very well. I've spoken to the pilots who are flying. The aircraft is very good to handle. The weapons are coming up in larger and larger numbers. It's already got a good Indian air-to-air missile on it. It's got all kinds of air-to-ground weapons. It's got a good radar. We are working closely for the radar with the Israelis. We are going to, this radar is going to come up in Mark 1A, will also come up in Jaguar. So a lot of activity is taking place. You must remember that in some areas we need external help. You see in BrahMos, the joint venture route has worked beautifully. We are going to export BrahMos to many countries are looking at. Recently, Philippines have said that we want to buy just 2 days back. So my contention is the LCA order for Mark 1A, again by me, should have been decided about a year back, but it doesn't matter. It's been decided. There are 73 single-seaters, 10 two-seater aircraft. Mark 1A will have, because some spade work HL has already been doing, some metal cutting has already taken place, and they will come. But certainly, I feel that the production of LCA has to go up. Even if the Mark II, which is the next variant, which is going to be a medium weight fighter of the size of the Mirage 2000, they will may take a little time. I mean, even if required, the Indian Air Force may order some more additional Mark 1As, provided the production goes up. We have to get numbers. For numbers, presently making about 12 aircraft a year, which is just now. In the past years, we have been making 6 to 8 aircraft a year. So there is a need for us to increase the production. The government has already given clearance for 16 aircraft a year production. The Pakistanis for JF-17 have got assembly line for 4 aircraft a year. So we should also target, I personally feel, that kind of assembly line. And the Indian Air Force, if required, will give some more orders. That's not a problem because we are short of numbers. So good aircraft, good platform, beautiful to fly, touch wood, extremely safe. We've had a great program. And only now we have to accelerate. Now, whether it's the Mark 1A, Mark 2, then AMCA, the country has to get going. We have to get the private sector in large numbers. We have got good. We are making lovely stuff already for some of the foreign platforms. We are making wings for F-16. We are making the whole body of helicopters, for the Americans. All kinds of things we are making. So we have to get our act right on this. Yes.
All right, sir. Sir, this is also one opportunity to talk to you as a retired air marshal, because 2 years of the Balakot airstrikes have been completed, and this is the one occasion in which we were celebrating and rejoicing what happened on the day of the airstrikes. So the Balakot airstrike that happened, that the Indian Air Force executed, was a very surprising element of attack even for the Indians, because we have never seen in the Indian Air Force active in such a combat role apart from the war or theaters in that case, as that matter of fact, sir. And so what is the paradigm shift here? I mean, a new dimension of the Indian Air Force has been revealed, a new angle or the new face of the Indian Air Force has been revealed post the Balakot strikes. How do you see it? How is the scenario now?
Yeah, let me first explain to you some of the good things that happened, the way the whole Balakot thing was conducted. Immediately after the Pulwama attack, the political leadership of the country had taken a decision that we have to punish. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I'll repeat this.
Sir, 1 second before you repeat, sir. Very gentle reminder, sir. We need to conclude the whole interview within 5 minutes. So, okay, sir, because we have one last question after this.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to wrap up very quickly this question. So I'm starting afresh on this. You see, immediately after the Pulwama attack, the government of the day had decided that we have to have a punitive strike. So the 3 chiefs were called, and then finally it was decided that it will be the air element which will be used for this strike. So therefore, the preparation started within 24 hours of the Pulwama attack. But see the beauty of the timing that was chosen for the strike. First, it was the previous evening, the entire defense establishment of the country, the Prime Minister, Defense Minister, NSA, the 3 chiefs, the senior officers were at the inauguration of the War Memorial in Delhi. Nobody could have thought. It was raining during that inauguration. I was myself present at that inauguration. That middle of the night, people are putting bombs on the aircraft, and at the middle of the night, somebody is going to. I mean, nobody could have thought on the other side कि ऐसा भी होगा, because this is the kind of secrecy. Second thing I must tell you, for preparing a strike of this kind, a lot of preparation. The squadron boys, the pilots, they would have done some dummy practices. They would have, the engineers, the technicians would have been asked to prepare a large number of bombs and missiles. All this. Nearly 5,000 to 6,000 people would have been. The radar controllers would be prepared, the AVAX aircraft, the air refuelers, the other fleets, the Su-30s, all were prepared. Not a word came out. 6,000 people in India, they say कि कुछ भी बात होता है, immediately the whole country comes to know. 6,000 people were involved in this exercise. Till the strike happened, nobody in the country knew about it, that कुछ होने वाला है. Second, the timing of the strike at 2 o'clock, this is called the graveyard shift time. That is the time when everybody is dead asleep. जो चौकीदार भी होते हैं ना हमारी colonies में, they are the weakest point is around 3 o'clock in the morning, and 3:15 was the time of the strike. Even Pakistan के radar controller भी आधी नींद में बैठे होंगे उस time. But Pakistan, I must tell you, knew that such a strike is going to come, and they were prepared. But still, the timing and secrecy was so beautiful that, and the weapons chosen, they were very accurate. Those weapons cannot fail. जो $2 million का वेपन होता है वो फेल अगर हो जाएगा तो कोई खरीदेगा नहीं. So my contention is to somebody say that spice इतना 5 spice गया और hit नहीं किया, they hit some trees and all that. It's all not possible. Nobody will buy a spice 2000, such an expensive weapon, that it will not hit the target. Uska accuracy is known. It is 3 meter and below accuracy. So it has to hit the target. So whether no. See, thereafter, after Balakot, there was psychological war going on on Twitter and everything. We all were participating in it, but that's okay. So I don't want to use that word "ghuske mara," but the point is that there's a paradigm shift. You have gone to another level, to nuclear powers, you punitive strike, future strikes can come. Pakistan is conscious. Though 2 months ke liye Pakistan did not open their airspace. They were so scared. Indian Air Force never closed the Indian Air Force even for a minute. Only in the northern Kashmir area we closed it for half a day. So you can imagine the impact that it has on the psyche of the other side. And I'm very happy to say that in the recent past, the touchwood, the number of the incidents of terrorism are reducing, and I think we are on a good wicket. Yes.
For the audience who does not know that your experience in, you were mentioning that you were 59 years and 2 months old when you had to eject of a Mirage 2000, 11,000 feet up in the sky. If you could talk about that experience and why should both men and women should look up Air Force as a potential career?
Yeah, no, a little while earlier I had mentioned that I was in 65 or a young student in a Sainik school, and I had seen air combat taking place, live combat taking place on top where Denzel Killer and the Killer brothers and others were involved. And that enthused me. And of course, I will tell you, most of the youth in this country and in most other countries, they want, when they are young, they are patriotic, they want to join the armed forces. And especially as far as aviation is concerned, of course, there is a level of glamour in aviation, but I must tell you, the quality of life that Indian armed forces allow you, the quality of professional work that the Air Force allows you to give. Yeah, everybody thinks that, oh, military may not be having much money, but how many people are earning big money in the country? Nobody. We are getting enough good money. I'm a retired air marshal. I'm living a very happy life. Even a retired colonel lives a very, very happy life. None of us need, money beyond a point. So money is a non-issue. The quality of life that you get in the armed forces, nowhere. Even the richest of people will send their children to, finishing schools abroad. You have the finishing school for an airman and officer, everybody in the Air Force. So great life, tough life. Or life is about, 2 words. Ek word Josh became very popular after the Uri strike and after that movie Uri that we all saw. Josh. What is Josh? Josh means passion and enthusiasm. And I think it's a fantastic word. As far as the Indian Air Force is concerned, if I was to live a second life, I would want to join Indian Air Force because the thrill of flying and the quality of life and the passion and enthusiasm with which I have lived it. Yes, at the age of 59 years, 2 months as an air marshal. You saw recently the air chief 3 days back flew a Mirage 2000 in a solo. Have you ever seen a Pakistan air chief flying solo? Never. The Indian Air Force flew a Mirage 2000 alone. The Pakistani air chief flies in a 2-seater that also sits in the back seat. So my contention is, we in Indian Air Force lead from the front. You have seen Dhanua flying a MiG-21, the previous air chief, alone in a solo flight. I was flying a Mirage 2000 that time at the age of 59 and a half years. So my contention is, and then of course something went wrong technically with the aircraft and I ejected them. But I must tell you, I am very proud of myself, of my training, that having ejected at 59 years, 2 months, I'm sitting straight and talking to you with so much of passion, on this interview that you guys are doing. And I'm walking erect, I'm playing golf, I'm doing lots of things that means my fitness, my training, my various things. And of course, God was extremely kind to me, because that's always very, important in a thing like that. So I want to tell the youth that passion, enthusiasm, and lead from the front. Even if you don't join Air Force, you join some other, profession, have the passion and lead from the front. And that's my message to the youth of the country. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking your time, by the way, and thank you so much for your service. And thank you so much for inspiring people like us to join the Air Force.
Yeah, God bless you, and all the very best. It was a great interacting with you all, and I have seen a little bit of you all on the internet. But I like the honest enthusiasm with which you people have conducted this interview, and I like the sort of desire in you to take to the public. Things about India, about what goes on. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you
you
so much.
Okay. Bye.
Jai Hind, sir.
Jai Hind. Jai Hind.